Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Newsmakers. We're glad you all came out at our new location, the Sweet Auburn Bistro. Let me bring to the stage 8-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, co-founder of Newsmakers Live and the Newsmakers Journal, my partner and friend, Mr. Maynard Eaton.
One of those serious issues of our time is abortion. And tonight we only get a chance to talk about it. You may have seen some billboards across town in the black community that says, "Black babies and endangered species." Well, that's created a firestorm of controversy, criticism, interest, and now proposed legislation in the state of Georgia. To talk about this issue with me tonight is Heidi Williamson. Heidi is a national advocacy coordinator for Sister Song. It's Heidi Williamson. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And the lady who kind of helped fuel this passionate debate is Catherine Davis. Catherine Davis is the Director of Minority Research at the Georgia Right to Life. Catherine, thank you for being here. And here's your mic. Catherine, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. Give me a sense. Earlier this summer, we saw billboards go up across town that indicated, in the black community, that perhaps black babies are an endangered species. Can you give me some idea of what that signified, what that actually said, and why?
The billboard campaign was an education campaign to alert the black community to the impact that abortion is having on the black community. We wanted something that would grab the attention of the black community so that people would begin to look at the numbers and see the impact that it's having. So it was designed to be a provocative education campaign.
And it did just that. It did provoke, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Give me your sense of what that meant, what that said. To my understanding, Sister Song and other groups like you were against that, thought it was misleading or misrepresentative.
Well, hello? Well, yes, Sister Song saw the billboards as offensive and incredibly demoralizing to black women. Particularly when you talk about abortion and the high rates that exist in the state of Georgia, it's irresponsible to simply lift up one piece of data and say, "Oh, how bad, look at." Sister Song, our reproductive justice organizations, look at reproductive social justice lens. So that means taking into consideration the high rates of unintended pregnancies, the high rates of STIs that exist in the African American community, and then the larger picture of the healthcare disparities that exist. If you consider the abortion, you want to talk about the abortion rate, that's one thing, but our healthcare outcomes are bad, no matter what the category is.
Well, do you agree, or is it so that black women are having more abortions than others? Is that so?
I think that that's reflected in the public data, but we know that abortions have been outside of the public data that's available. And particularly when you look at the data here in Georgia, we know that that's not simply Georgia residents. We know that that is women coming in from out of town, in part because, unfortunately, Georgia is more progressive than the states that surround us.
Catherine, what are those numbers? I've heard you quoted having some horrific sounding numbers. What are those?
In 2008, there were 32,066 abortions on Georgia women. That is not counting the women that came from other states. That's just Georgia women. And of that number, 18,901 were on black Georgia women. And in my mind, that's a horrific number. Whether you are pro-abortion or pro-life, 18,901 black women aborted their children, and I believe there's something more insidious behind that number than simply sisters exercising their right to choose.
I heard you quoted, I heard you say, perhaps in the debate, that in effect we're killing our babies, killing our culture. Isn't that a little strong?
I don't think it's strong to say that 18,901 abortions in 1 year for the last 12 to 15 years, Georgia has averaged an average of between 15 and 18,000 abortions on black women every year. But we set a record in 2008. Whether you want to say that the majority culture is having more abortions than us, they just are not going into the clinics or not, that is a horrific number. A horrific number, that 18,901 black women had unprotected sex in a time when the leading cause of death for black women 18 to 34 is AIDS. There's something wrong that our numbers are so high when we are 30% of the population of Georgia, but we're accounting for close to 60% of the abortions in the state. My campaign was simply to call attention to that horrific impact. If 6 million Jews dying in Germany was a Holocaust, what do you call 18,870,000 black babies since 1973? I think something's wrong, and I wanted to call attention to that.
Now, it does sound rather alarming, just on the face of it. How do you respond to that?
Well, first I'd like to say that to compare the abortions that black women had to a Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, it verges on anti-Semitism for me. If I accepted the logic of Ms. Davis, then I would believe that black women are perpetrators on our community, and I mean, no disrespect to either of you, as the only person up here who's likely to reproduce in the near future, I can say that if I'm trusted,
okay.
I think that's real.
That's true.
I think that's real for someone who is likely to reproduce of the three of us in the near future. I think that it's important to know I can be trusted to pay my mortgage, I can be trusted to go to work, I can be trusted to vote, but somehow my choice and my mind is not just trusted if I have to engage the medical system and go and have an abortion. Now, the rates, she loves to talk about the numbers, but there's one number that keeps ringing in my mind, and that's the number 13. Can you guess why that number means so much to me?
I don't want to guess.
Because when abortion was illegal in the state of Georgia, black women were 13 times as likely to die from an illegal abortion as white women. And so the reality is that number pales in comparison to the number of women who were dropping dead. We have testimony from ministers who would get up and go to preach a sermon in the morning and half their pews were empty because black women went to have abortions and never came home. Those were mothers, those were leaders in the community. And I think that to talk about the numbers of abortions that women have without really engaging the real issue, which is unintended pregnancies, we're doing a disservice to our community.
Now, I take great exception to much of what Heidi just said, because first and foremost, I have said nothing against black women. I am a black woman, and I have not disparaged my sisters in any way. I am calling attention to the fact that we are, I believe, being targeted by the abortion community. And just like people say to me, well, they put their liquor stores in our neighborhoods and they put all of this stuff in our neighborhoods. Well, they put their abortion clinics in our neighborhoods to create the need. And if we are talking about safe sex or exercising your decision to control your reproductive health, I don't know of any other health procedure that 100% of the time results in a death. 100% of the time. And secondly, black women are still dying in the abortion clinic. So don't play that game that because we have legalized abortion in America, black women are not dying. Because I would tell you to tell the mother of the young lady that came here from another state and her daughter did not come home because she went to a safe, legal abortion clinic. So I take great exception to this notion that I am speaking against our capability to make a decision. The only thing I'm attempting to do is give you all the information. If you still decide, knowing all of the information, that you want to have an abortion, then I've done the best I could do. But if you are only getting a small portion of the information and making a decision, then I think a disservice is being done to the black woman.
I heard you take a deep sigh breath there, a smile. You obviously take exception to it.
Well, I mean, I think there has been an indictment made on black women when you put a billboard up that says black children are an endangered species. And so when you call a black child an endangered species, not only does it harken back to a time when scientific racism ruled, deeming black women unfit as people and as human beings, you are belittling our children using language that has been used against us as a community. Now, if you want to talk about facts, let's talk about facts. Of the 14 abortion clinics that are in the state of Georgia, they are not in black communities. Only 4 of them in black communities. If you want to talk about the choices that black women have to make in regards to our children, let's talk about what we're doing to prevent pregnancies before they happen and the value that we're placing on women and their children after their children are birthed.
Is the answer that we kill our babies because we have social justice concerns? Is the answer to poverty? Is the answer to the lack of education? Is the answer to the black men in prison that we kill the very thing that would make us a strong political force, social force, and moral force in this nation? I take exception to that. I get so passionate. When we think of what is happening in our community today, that we would accept that the answer to the problems that we are facing is to take the very lives of the ones that might have the answers to solve the problems. I take exception to that. I just don't believe that we have to go to that low of a level in order to survive in the 21st century America. I think we can do better.
I've heard you suggest that there's somehow Planned Parenthood or some conspiracy of sorts started by Margaret Sanger, the eugenicist, about targeting black folks. And, you really believe that, in a sense, that they're trying to get rid of the least of these?
I don't believe it in a sense. I believe it with every fiber of my being that the black community has been targeted by the abortion industry. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it last year in 2009 in a New York Times interview that Roe v. Wade was the case that was going to enable us to get rid of the populations we didn't want too many of. Well, what population is that? All you have to do is look at Planned Parenthood's Negro Project, where Margaret Sanger paid black preachers to teach birth control from the pulpit, where the president of the American Eugenics Society said birth control and abortion are the greatest eugenic advances of our time, to see who they were targeting. It was those of us with the thick lips and the prognathous jaws that they felt should not be allowed to live. So yes, I believe we've been targeted, and unfortunately this population control dogma is causing us to commit race suicide.
Heidi, is this argument taking hold? Is this campaign starting to have an effect, or is it still kind of whistling in the wind and largely reserved to conservatives? But is it starting to have an impact on people that you do?
I think that depending on who you're talking to, particularly people who are ill-educated, as Ms. Davis is, about the eugenics movement, buy into this. I mean, the reality is there has been no eugenical plot by Planned Parenthood. Sister Song was an organization founded by communities of color and indigenous women to specifically look at population control practices and to make sure that future policies have women at the center of their lens, that women decide when they have children, that women decide when they don't have children, and that women have the social supports necessary when they have the children, when they choose to birth children. So when we talk about things like the Negro Project, Ms. Davis will do well to know that the Black community, leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, Dorothy Height, asked Margaret Sanger to come into the Black community so that Black women would have access to birth control. There was no plot. That was our brightest minds recognizing that due to abortion being a #1 killer of Black women, that there was a way to prevent abortions from occurring, which was by preventing pregnancies to begin with.
A lot of people have said a lot of things about me, but one of the things, this is the first time ever that I have ever had anyone say to me that I'm uneducated. I could have a PhD, ill-educated. I have the letter that Margaret Sanger wrote to Dr. C.J. Gamble, where she said that the pastor was the one to straighten it out should it ever occur to any of our more rebellious members that we want to exterminate them. Well, I'm a rebellious member. I would also take exception to what you said because your president, Loretta Ross, said I get some things right in a YouTube video that you can Google for yourself. So she talked about the eugenics effect of abortion in the abortion industry. She agreed that we have to be concerned.
She did not say that.
All I have to say is go to YouTube and look it up. It's called Are Black Children an Endangered Species?
Where are we now with regard to this potential legislation? Senate Bill 290, I believe that 529. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, this could have a wholesale impact on abortion laws across the country. Ms. Davidson, what does it say, what does it mean, and what's the political reality of it actually passing the House?
The bill says that if a woman is coerced into having an abortion, or if the motive behind the abortion is the race or gender of a child, that would be a criminal abortion in Georgia. It could be being debated on the floor right now, I don't know, but it did pass the Judicial Committee today, and it was in the Rules Committee when I left the Capitol not too long ago, and I was led to believe that there was a possibility that they could address it tonight or probably on Tuesday.
I mean, if this passes, that seemingly would open the door for other legislation to do much the same. Could this have a ripple effect, or what are your concerns about the impact of this legislation?
Well, my biggest concern is about the immediate impact. This bill would, in essence, allow for the discrimination of women of color who seek an abortion, because now doctors are required doctors who give abortions will be required to interrogate women as to why they're there. Are you here because you think that, the race of your baby is an unwanted race, which I've never known a Black woman to not know the race of her baby. Asian women will be subjected to questions around gender selection. I have extreme concerns about what this means for the medical community. I mean, when we talk about the healthcare disparities that exist in communities of color, particularly the Black community, it's in part because of the lack of access that we have to healthcare providers anyway. So when you have a bill that has broad implications for doctor-patient confidentiality, has broad implications for how a doctor can be criminalized for something that only a doctor and a patient would know about, I have real concerns. At the end of the day, this bill does nothing to address the unintended pregnancies that African Americans lead in. It does nothing to address the STI rates in the African American community. As we speak, there are 7 STIs that are in epidemic proportions, according to the CDC, happening in the Black community. This bill does nothing to address the root causes of abortion at epidemic proportions. And so there is a real issue. There are human rights violations at the core of this, when we have an enormous amount of people who live in poverty, who are uninsured, underinsured, and even if they have insurance, we need to make sure that doctors are available and accessible in the communities that need them.
If this passes, what are the potential consequences? Does this open the door to Roe v. Wade? Does it kick it ajar? there's some political consequences should this pass on it.
Well, my first concern is women. Women who go voluntarily to an abortion clinic because that's the service that they feel is best for them at that given moment. To be interrogated, to be asked questions about their relationship, why they're there, who brought them there, are they being coerced? To assume that they're being coerced, to me, is unconscionable. It violates the human right to an abortion. And then the doctors, I mean, at the end of the day, this is criminalizing doctors for coercion that happens by third parties outside the doctor's office.
Catherine, is this a good thing? And what does it mean politically should it pass?
There are reports that 64% of the abortions done in America are coerced abortions.
And by that you mean coerced? Explain.
Somebody coerced them. Somebody took them into the abortion clinic and made them have that abortion. It wasn't the woman exercising her decision. For example, one of the young women that gave testimony at the hearing reported that her parents forced her to abort her baby because they didn't want her to bring that little black so-and-so in their house. So it happens, but if it happened one time, I would want that woman to have the opportunity to get some safety from that doctor saying, I'm sorry, but if you are coerced into aborting that baby, I can't do that because that's not legal in Georgia. Just like an employer can't tell you that they're not going to hire you because you're a woman or because you're black, I don't think an abortion doctor should be able to abet a crime that wouldn't otherwise be legal in this state by aborting the baby. And it happens, and there are doctors that advertise telling you, I do gender selection abortions. I was driving in Macon and coming off the highway, and along the side of the road were signs that said, we do gender selection abortions, call this number, we'll give you the test. So it is happening in this great state, and I, for one, would like to see it stop. Will this bill challenge Roe? It could challenge Roe v. Wade. It very well could.
Is that what has kind of stirred this national debate? That this could be an opening salvo to overturn Roe v. Wade?
I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is, at the end of the day, as I was saying earlier, as a black woman who can be trusted to carry out many tasks during a day and during a lifetime, when I'm competent to go to work, pay taxes, vote, all of a sudden, when it comes to the issue of abortion, I'm somehow being conned by either a doctor or an abortion industry that I guess is so persuasive that my own desires I can't go of my own volition to have this medical procedure. I take offense to that. I have a problem with that. And I think that when we talk about coercion, generally speaking, particularly in communities of color, exists. But there's no proof that coercion exists regarding abortion. I want to see the evidence. The 60% I still have not seen that evidence. Now, I listened and had a conversation with the girl who testified last week, 14 years old, was pregnant, and she said her parents coerced her into having an abortion. And in my mind, because the conversation I had with her later, someone asked her how old was the father of that child. The father of the baby was 23 years old. And so I really had to ask her, do you really think your parents were coercing you into an abortion? Or do you think that as a 14-year-old, your parents were simply weighing in because that was their parental responsibility? And so you have to be careful how you throw around terms about coercion, because real coercion, we have members in our base who have experienced real coercion, forced sterilization, family caps on welfare, families who've lost their homes, women who cannot take care of their children because they have been coerced by governmental policies. So I push back on that term being very loosely thrown around and being put together with abortion because it sounds provocative.
It's interesting to me that you can point the finger at the parent when they made their daughter abort their baby, but that same 14-year-old was able to go into that clinic without her parents' permission and abort that baby. That same 14-year-old was treated in every other respect as an adult until it came to making the decision about whether or not she could keep her child, and suddenly the parent should be able to weigh in. Well, why wasn't the parent able to weigh in on the front end?
That's a good question. I think that's a great question.
So
I think that's a great question.
Yes, and in Georgia,
but when you have a 14-year-old and a 23-year-old, I would suggest
it's a crime, and I think the 23-year-old should have been locked up too, because that was statutory rape, so they should have put him in jail too. But when that doctor heard that she wanted to keep her baby, True Choice would have said, I am not going to take the life of the baby because you are choosing to keep it. And that's what Senate Bill 529 will ensure happens. If she's old enough to decide to sleep with that Negro in the first place, then she should have been old enough to exercise her choice to keep her baby.
Let me guess, we're going to have some questions from the audience pretty soon, but let me ask about this. I understand that Kathy, the Georgia legislature, Black Caucus, is against the bill, but many leading people at the head of the NAACP are for it. So is this going to split the Black community? Where are they politically?
I can't speak for the whole Black community, and I would never presume to do that, because the people that they look at sometimes and say that they are speaking for me are not. So I'm not even going to go down that path. However, this is an issue that we must get educated about. It is not as simple as us exercising a choice once that baby is conceived. Because once that baby is conceived, we are now dealing with another life, not just the mother. It is another human being. The only way that we can become any kind of force to be reckoned with in this nation is in our numbers. We are the only ethnic group that has not grown since the 1930s. We've been 12 to 13% of the population. Every other ethnic group is growing beyond us, but we are fighting a battle that is not helping us to preserve our lives in this nation.
Now that concerns me. Since we're kind of reducing our impact, that aspect really does kind of concern me. Now, is there an answer for that?
Which aspect?
That we're losing our clout, losing our numbers.
Well, first of all, let me say, the African American population has been going down since slavery, in part because we're in control of our fertility. When Black women stopped being bred by slave owners, we cut the population ourselves because we wanted to choose when and how we had children. I think, based on Ms. Davis's logic, the more children I have, the more oppression I can breed myself out of. We've been down that path. It does not work. I cannot breed myself out of oppression. Okay. And to simply say to create larger numbers is the way. The African American community has a whole lot of problems. And making more babies, for you to offer that as the only solution to our problems, I think is just misguided.
I never said it was the only solution to our problems, but I tell you what, if we keep controlling our fertility at the rate that we're doing it today, we won't have to worry about it because we won't be here. Because eventually we are going to fall below our replacement rate. But let's get real. Let's strip away the fluff. If you were going to exercise a right to choose, shouldn't you do that before you get pregnant? Because once you get pregnant, you are not just dealing with you. You are now dealing with another life, a whole separate individual, another person. It is not just about you. So if we're going to get real, then we should be fighting to choose before we get pregnant.
And so I guess that, for me, raises a question for the people who are so committed to passing this bill. Where are you when we're having these coalition meetings to prevent unintended pregnancies? Where are you when we're having all of these meetings and trying to pass legislation to fully fund domestic violence programs or make sure that women who have
my own
children...
meetings.
I'm sure. But unfortunately, they're not with the power brokers. The power brokers...
Who are the power brokers, Heidi?
Part of them are the people who support this bill. Senate Bill 529. They have no intention of investing in unintended... That's not true, sweetheart. I've been lobbying for over 6 years.
I'm going to take some questions now from the audience, please. I thought this is getting quite interesting, quite fascinating. While we're waiting for the first question, give me a sense of what this has done. Where are we now with it? Is this galvanized opposition to it? What are your thoughts about what this campaign has wrought?
Well, I mean, I think it has opened up a conversation. I don't know how healthy the conversation is when you have a lot of misinformation laid on the table and people don't know what to do with it. At Sister Song, we're about solutions. We work and support organizations in the community who are working on everything from unintended to producing unplanned pregnancies to making sure that abortion rights stay intact to making sure that women have the social supports that they need. Our base is pro-life, pro-choice, and pro-parent because women of color historically have had to fight equally for all of those rights. And so our broad-based support is about making sure that the laws that will protect women and empower women and that women have all the autonomy that they need to raise their, make decisions about their bodies and raise their families.
Our first question comes from...
Our first question is going to come from Chuck, and he asked if you ask a question, you don't make a statement.
That's going to be very hard to do.
Because Chuck going to make a statement.
I'm going to have to say a few things, but I'm not going to make a statement. I'm going to ask you this question. Senate Bill 529, it is to outlaw the abortion of babies by gender and race, correct?
And coercion.
And coercion. How do you determine when a woman is coming into an abortion clinic to have an abortion because of race? And who is forcing women to go into these abortion clinics? They go in voluntarily, I assume. I've never seen anyone force a woman to walk into a clinic. And so you want to criminalize this. When a woman goes into an abortion clinic and she says she doesn't want to have her baby, she's got to tell the doctor, I'm a black woman and I'm having a black baby, but I don't want to have it because it's black. Is that what you're saying?
That's not at all what I'm saying. There are examples after examples all across the state of Georgia of women that have been coerced into an abortion. One recent example that I can give you happened with the parents of the boy taking the girl to the abortion clinic and making her abort the baby because she didn't want her son's life to be messed up. That's one example. In terms of race, no, I don't think at all that that a woman is going to go in there and say, I don't want a black baby because it's black. I'm black and my baby's black. But I think a woman from another culture might go in there and say, I'm being made to kill this baby, or I don't want this baby because it's black. It could be the parent, it could be the father of the child, it could be the husband, it could be a whole host of people.
And I think it's important to note the bill only criminalizes the doctor, even though all these other people are in play that are actually forcing the coercion. The bill only criminalizes the doctor.
The doctor has a higher ethical standard to protect his patients. There's an ethical standard that the doctors abide by to protect the patient. And that's why the doctor is held to a higher standard.
Okay, Loretta has a question for you. Yeah, first of all,
Please identify who you are.
my name is Loretta Ross. I live here in Atlanta. And I do not appreciate being misquoted, having a quote of mine extracted from a larger context. I do believe that abuse occurs against the African American community, but the ain't the ones doing it, nor the doctors who help us. But my question is, are you actually allocating, first of all, that a 14-year-old impregnated by a 23-year-old should be forced to have the child of the man who committed statutory rape against her, number one, and number two, are you actually saying that the parents of a 14-year-old should not participate in the decision whether that baby is born, since they're the ones most likely to have to raise both the new baby and the baby that's having the baby? What in the world are you talking about?
Do you really want me to respond to that, or was that rhetorical? What I said was, well, let me respond to the first part. I never said that black women commit eugenics. I said Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers have targeted as a part of their eugenics agenda the black community. Secondly, if a 14-year-old can decide to have sex, and yes, it was statutory rape, but I don't know of her being forced to have that baby. She was choosing to have her baby. And if she is choosing, I don't think choice stops if they decide in favor of keeping their child rather than aborting.
Let me ask one quick question. This sort of comment suggests that your campaign has brought out a lot of criticism of you. Is that what you found? That people either vehemently disagree with you or don't understand?
Yes, I have been criticized. And that's okay, because I know that what I'm saying is controversial. I know that what I'm saying goes against a cultural indoctrination that has happened over a 37-year period since abortion has been legal. My objective and my goal is simply to call attention to something that I believe is factually accurate, factually documented. This is information I searched out with my own brown eyes. I didn't rely on something that someone else was saying. I didn't rely on something that I was hearing from other people, but I went and did the research myself and found that yes, Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers directed their energies, directed their programs to solve the question of what to do with the 4 million slaves that were freed and how were they going to control it, going all the way back to slavery up until today. Just 2 years ago, an undercover investigation of Planned Parenthood had every one of them across the country agreeing to accept money specifically to abort a black baby. Specifically to abort a black baby. No matter how vile the guy got in his conversation, he said, I don't want my children to have to compete with affirmative action. They said, whatever, we'll take the money. He said, there's way too many black people in Ohio. She said, you know, we will take the money, and you can target it specifically to go against a black baby. That's what I'm talking about.
Some of your critics say really you're a tool of the conservative right, so you're kind of a stalking one.
Yes.
Well, let me say this.
Who's funding you? Yeah. Where those billboards come from? How much?
Those billboards came out of me.
Let's try to do this in order, and let's not just throw questions out. Just be respectful and let her give her a chance to answer. And when you finish that, I have a young lady here for Santa Ana wants to ask a question. Thank you.
The billboard, I'm sorry, what was the question?
There are those who suggest, those critics have said basically you're a tool or a pawn or a puppet of the conservative right.
I am the tool, pawn, and puppet of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. There is no white man, no conservative, no other kind of man, woman, child, dog, or cat that controls this black woman right here. This black woman has a mind of her own. I am a magna cum laude graduate. I am not an ignorant woman. I'm not a dumb woman. I can read. And above all else, I love my people. And with my dying breath, I can stop one sister for feeding into the eugenic agenda, then I have done my job. Nobody's pulling my strings. I pull my own strings, and I do what the Lord tells me to do because I love him and he controls me. No,
My question is Heidi. In January 2010, a woman by the name of Alexander Nunes from Bronx, New York, died while having a safe legal abortion. Year after year, after you research, there are women who are going into abortion clinics and quote having safe and legal abortions, yet they're not walking out the same, they're walking out injured. My question is, as women, what are we going to do to protect these women who every day are going in thinking they're going in for a medical procedure, yet they're walking out dead, they're walking out injured, and then some of them can't even have children later on. What are we going to do as women?
I think Sister Song works as well as we can with the medical community to prevent things like that from happening. But I have to be honest, while I definitely keep women like Ms. Nunes in my mind, I can't help but think about some of the women over the last year here in Grady who have walked into the Grady emergency room from reports of what we have found out to be septic abortions. They tried to self-abort because they couldn't get to a legal clinic. I think with any medical procedure that there are risks. I know that clinics do what they can to educate women before the procedures take place, but part of this fight when we keep services safe and legal is to constantly improve and make sure that women are protected and have the medical procedure done as quickly and as harmless as possible.
Finally, where are we now on that absolutely for this final question? Where are we now with debate? What is this law? Where are we now as we speak today? You're concerned? Do you think, where are you now?
Well, as a reproductive justice organization, when it comes to things like the billboards, we work with our base to make sure that people understand the reality about abortion in the Black community, the impact of healthcare disparities on a broader scale, and the agency that Black women historically have had when exercising the right to utilize abortion. On the legislative front with Senate Bill 529, we're working to make sure that that is defeated by sine die and will be, it's not over literally until it's over. While it was passed out of committee, there are no guarantees that it will go to the floor. The Speaker has a discretion to hold it, send it back, do whatever he likes, and we will be exercising all of our resources to make sure that it doesn't make it out.
And finally, Davis, where are you now? You've gotten a lot of national publicity, a lot of publications. Have you made a difference? And where are you now?
I believe I have, and with my dying breath, as I said a moment ago, I am going to fight to educate Black women so that we have all of the information and that we are fully informed and fully aware of the decisions that are being made, including all of the other health ramifications that happen to women as a result of having an induced abortion. So I'm not going away. I'm going to be around. I'm going to keep doing what I do. And I pray, like I said, if there's even one sister that gets understanding, then I've done my job. God bless each and every one of you.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming out. I'd like to thank Catherine. Come in, and Heidi, thank you. I figured this out. I know you don't think I figured this out, but I figured this out. Both of these women are very intelligent African American women. And they both have strong positions that favor us as a people. However, the market-driven environment that we exist in right now has not caught up with the issue of abortion. We have a market-driven economy, and no matter what product or service you put out there, people will market to those people most likely to use it and abuse it. That's where we are right now. Catherine has a position which requires some merit, and her position is, from where I stand, as an African American man,
is that no death of any black child is a good idea. Heidi, on the other hand, takes the position that we have to approach this issue of abortion when there is a need. Both of these positions are sound. But we must remember that we live in a multi-given environment. And wherever abuse can take place, it will. And as African Americans, we must always be vigilant against genocidal practices. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Newsmakers.